All right, welcome back. Our next presentation is by a noted collector of Latino Tejano art. He's going to speak on Latino Tejano art, a collector's perspective. Gilberto Cárdenas is a professor emeritus at the University of Notre Dame, where he earned his Ph.D. in sociology. After teaching at the University of Texas from 1975 to 1999, he returned to his alma mater, where he held the Julian Zamora Chair in Latino Studies until 2012, and founded the Institute for Latino Studies in 1999 and the Notre Dame Center for Arts and Culture in 2012. An acclaimed scholar in Mexican immigration, Cárdenas has served on numerous boards, including the National Hispanic Cultural Museum and the Smithsonian Institute, where he is instrumental in proposing the Smithsonian Latino Center and a National Museum of American Latino. Cárdenas founded the Galeria Sin Fronteras in Austin in 1986 and has amassed a significant private collection of Latino art. Please welcome Dr. Cárdenas.
Thank you. Real pleasure to be here with you all. I appreciate the invitation to present. I have been going through a number of health issues at my later stages in life. I'm not a teenager anymore, and surprisingly have all these different kinds of things that have developed. So I'm going to try to stand properly and try to be as clear as possible. I can't see as well as I used to see. I can't hear as well as I used to hear, and so on. So I have a slide presentation that will share with you work that have been collected and artists who we've been collecting, a limited number of them. I wish I had 2 days to show you the stuff, but it's not quite. One of the areas I want to explain to you is that when I talk about Tejano artists, I'm talking about a multiplicity of geographic kind of issues. One are artists who are born here and are still here, artists who were born here and left but are still very productive and are known as Tejano artists, and then artists who moved here from Venezuela or moved here from Mexico and have contributed to what's known as Tejano art or Latino art, artists who came in from New York and are here. So there's a multiplicity of artists that I'm referring to when I talk about Texas artists, because they help create an art scene in Texas through creating print studios or doing prints in the state or teaching and being involved in educating artists, Latino and other artists in universities and other places. So this is, for me, the way I'm presenting my talk about Tejano artists. I hope that's clear and acceptable to you. It's not only directing. I also want to share a little bit of our collection, so I'm kind of like showing off a little bit, not a whole lot, but some. And then through that process, I'll be talking about myself in many ways. The first artist here is a Puerto Rican artist that I first met in New York, and then he moved with his partner to San Antonio and has been doing a lot of work, and then he passed away recently in the last few years. Very productive artist, and again, so that's one of the examples that we use to showcase his work. It's now in donation. Got to put my glasses on and off, sorry. My interest, and we're going to go to slide 2 now. And all right, so the overview here, which I can't barely see. Can we make it larger, Josh? Well, better not leave the stage. So early background of why I collect. Yeah, so the overview then is trying to show the importance of the impact on my collecting of art and my wife, Dolores Garcia, who's sitting here, right? So, and the importance of building relationships with artists, not just in Texas, but throughout the country, and then linking artists together in working on projects and doing activities and sharing exhibitions and supporting each other and getting museums in different parts of the country into their collections. So that's part of my role. I'm not the only one who's worked on that with Latino art, but I'll be talking about my experience, that I know best, as a collector, as an activist, as a scholar, professor, and retiree now. And then there'll be a focus on the Tejano and Latino artists, selected a number of artists to talk about. I won't go into detail. I'm not an art historian. As I mentioned, my background is in sociology. International migration was my first interest and my main interest, and I'll make reference to that later. We co-authored the first book in 1970 about illegal migration. Not the first book in the history, but in terms of the current debate, it's still continuing. We did a lot of work on the border. I was born in the United States, Los Angeles initially, lived most of my life in Texas, with a period of time later on going back to Notre Dame. Make reference to the future and where Latino art stands in the world today, and where it stands in America, and where it stands with ourselves as well, as part of the conclusion. I grew up in Los Angeles in a period of time when we faced a lot of discrimination. So I had experiences, and don't talk a lot about it, but it's never left my mind, of facing discrimination and segregation in Los Angeles and related areas. So I'll be covering that. And by that I mean, like, even where I lived in San Gabriel, which is the oldest residential area in the city of Los Angeles, which precedes the formation of the city of Los Angeles, when they established the mission. And even before that, for the indigenous people who were living there, there's an area called the Village where the Native Americans used to live, that's really central in San Gabriel, but it's against the law. If you wanted to sell me a piece of property or sell my father, and my father could afford it, and my mother, it was against the law for you to sell it to me, to them. The state of California had passed legislation, like many other states, that forbid people of color to live in those neighborhoods. That changed. But that's my first experience. I say that's my first experience because the closest elementary school, Lincoln Elementary, was predominantly minority, mainly Mexican American, and they closed the school down and bussed us out. This is before busing was forced. They just chose to do that about a year before the law changed. And I was bused to McKinley School on the other side of the village. And I remember this, and you know, the very few things you remember when you're a little child. In kindergarten, I remember how to say that properly. A parent brought in an invitation for a birthday party, but she didn't have my name on the list. And I do remember, I can remember the name of my teacher, who told her she couldn't pass it around if I wasn't invited. And she was a minority. And so I got invited to it. I'll never forget that. My mother and I went to it. And so that's another experience. So, you know, these little things started having an impact on my mind. You know, my friends could go, I couldn't go, things of that sort, early on in life. So this is not an ideological thing. This is a memory that shaped my life and my interest in what I studied, what I did in college, how I misbehaved. You'll hear this later, but I was a long-haired crazy hippie in the 1960s, and we had a lot of activities, anti-war, you know, anti-Vietnam, fighting for educational opportunities. We finally got a law passed, not just us, but the whole state of people fighting for this, to get the law changed to enable educational opportunities for financial assistance to people who would qualify to go to college. Years later, I was with the Gates Foundation, and they provided $1 billion and largest philanthropic gift ever. And I was on the committee to form a fellowship program, the Bill Gates and Melinda Scholarship Program. So again, I'm going off, but it's just a quick reference. So that early days then, you know, I had that experience. When we were fighting for the Educational Opportunities Program to get enacted, we went to visit the state assemblyman from Monterey Park. And we're sitting down talking to him, trying to plead with him to support that. And after a conversation, he said, "Are you asking me to put water in the milk. Like if we went there, we're going to dilute the quality of students in universities and colleges. So this is, again, my experience then. And again, had an impact. And again, I was already an activist and getting influenced that direction and really beginning to study in sociology the whole questions about ethnicity, about culture, about history, many areas of educational opportunities, and really got me interested in doing documentary photography. So we can go on. So San Gabriel, I mentioned that already. That's the San Gabriel mission. Father Sierra is the one, the founder from Spain. I visited his community in the island, Mallorca, thank you. Controversial, as a Catholic priest, but still did some good things and really was the line between the community, the native indigenous community, and the California military, and before that, the Mexican military, to protect the native peoples. So no matter what people say about them, I'll never forget that part of it. So again, that's the background, right? That's part of the background. That's not the only part, but I became a misguided undergraduate, long-haired, crazy hippie. And this is a photograph at Notre Dame with some friends. And on the other side, on the right side there, is my long-haired, crazy hippie days, along with Paul Schuster Taylor, who's married to Dorothea Lange. I think you might all know Dorothea Lange, a great photographer. I got to meet him when I taught at Berkeley later as a visiting professor. And we got together a lot, but he came to Notre Dame when I was a graduate student. We had an opportunity to spend a lot of time together. And he introduced me. I never went, but I got invited by Ansel Adams to go to his place in Carmel, Texas. I wasn't traveling a lot then. I didn't go. I was a graduate student, barely making it through financially. And Paul Strand, who was in, I think, France at the time. So I just had really wonderful man. So when I went back to Berkeley, we got along together. He has since passed, but really did a lot in studying Mexicans in the United States, Texas, California, in the Midwest, and Chicago, and published a number of monographs in 1928, 1930, 32. So I was really pleased with his work and his interest in art, too. He took the photography as well. So with that, that's where I got that interest combined in doing documentary photography. So I started documenting a lot of the activities in the community and beyond. The top shelf there with the man with its child is actually later in El Salvador. I went down with the Salvador Voter Registration Group, the president and part of the people to go to Mexico and Central America and visit all the nations there. And also then there was a demonstration in Colorado with the Crusade for Justice, a very activist political organization, very militant group, but they wanted to do a demonstration, so they left the conference and they went to the Capitol in Denver. And the American flag was hanging there, and he told everyone ahead of time, we're going there in support of the farm workers' strike. We're not going there to disrupt anything. And so he insisted that no one mess with the flag or do anything disruptive, other than trying to make a statement in support of the farm workers who are struggling to create one of the first unions ever in the agricultural industry. And they were striking against in Delano. I ended up meeting at Notre Dame some of the biggest wine company owners and having dinner with them later. But that time, we had a lot of opposition, a lot of things going on. But my photography then aimed at documenting living and working conditions of poor people in the neighborhoods as well as in the agricultural sectors of society. When I went to Notre Dame, continued that photography and shared that with others, got to meet artists that way. And sometimes we trade some of their work with my photographs, and I was really influenced with a lot of the work they were doing, and I don't know if I influenced them, but they were happy to have my work. So I really am grateful to the folks at Notre Dame who enabled me to contribute working in Michigan and Chicago. And there I met a lot of artists, believe it or not, from Texas, as well as later in life. I'll return to that. The bottom photograph there is a demonstration in Mexico City at the UNAM. The walkout. It's not there? Oh, okay. We moved it. Well, anyway, I had a photograph there, the big demonstration and a walkout. And here we have the founder, William Velasquez, of the Southwest Voter Registration Project. And he had a strong interest in art, too, so he encouraged me. He took me to some of the colleges in San Antonio to see some of the artwork that artists had developed. I couldn't tell you the names today. I didn't document it, but I had a chance to visit that. And this is at Notre Dame, my professor, Julian Zamora, the first ever Mexican-American professor in sociology. So again, I talk about a lot of firsts here. When I went to Notre Dame, I was the only Chicano graduate student admitted that year for graduate school in the whole university. And there were 10 Mexican-American. Now, we're Catholic, a majority of us at that time, maybe 92% of us were Catholic. Now, it's not discrimination, it's money. And it's a private university, so it's not that they discriminated against us, it's just they didn't have educational opportunity set aside in their, to help the students who otherwise could be admitted, just as we did with the Gates Foundation. They had to be admitted on their own terms to get in, and then we made a difference for the Gates Foundation Fellows Program so they can go to the school instead of just going to a Texas school near their home. So this enabled them to go. That went beyond the whole full salary of the parents, just to be in school. So these loans and gifts were real helpful to them throughout the country. We first got $1 billion, and we needed another $500 million, and they provided it. So I was real happy with the Gates Foundation. So then I joined the faculty at UT Austin in 1975. So I'm telling you all this because, again, my interest in photography and my interest in art went along the interest in migration and border studies. We went to the border. We got permission from the Commissioner of Immigration to cross the border illegally so we could be part of our experience to talk about that. We went to the Border Patrol detention centers inside. We went to Latino prison. We went to a variety of places. Actually, in Latino prison, we're walking through with the person who took us through, the associate director or whatever he was, and my professor. And this prisoner said, Gilberto, Shugi, calling me by my nickname from the gang days. And he knew me. I looked at him. I couldn't remember at that time, but it's somebody's brother who I used to date. So it's never left me, I guess. So the days of being a professor were interesting too, because the first artist that got me interested in exhibiting was Jose Gonzalez from Chicago. When he was a graduate student as well. He didn't finish his master's. He had he was schizophrenic, and he just didn't finish. And unfortunately, but he's the one who got me interested in setting up the first exhibit I got involved in. Again, hundreds of exhibits later, but he's the one who really got me inspired. I want to give him credit for that. There was a piece of artwork that was shown. He wasn't selling his work at all. I wanted to buy it. He said no. Years later, I was on the board of the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago, and they had it displayed after he passed. And there's no way, I went to see if I can purchase it. They said no. So I went, they said, you can buy it and give it to us. So I went to the bookstore, gave my credit card, and bought it. So at least I owned it for a second and just left it there, and it's still there. A number of things happened when I was a professor, a little bit out of the field too. I was asked by a student who worked in a radio program to help them form Latino USA, program I ended up naming Latino USA and hiring Maria Hinojosa and Maria Martin, our senior producer Maria Martin. Maria Hinojosa was our host to launch that program. And I tell you this because they had a really big influence on me to encourage me to stay with photography and get out of the media area. I had no background in radio, but believe it or not, because of their participation, I was able to raise, several million over a short period of time. and even places that didn't get grants the first time you wrote a grant. You have to sometimes submit it 2 or 3 times before you get an NPR grant or CPB grant. And we got grants the first time, both times. And we also had a great person helping us with our advertising and marketing. And they told us, we got funded, but they said, be happy if you reach 30 stations. You're not going to reach 50 stations your first year. Well, I knew somebody, an African-American woman, who worked with Bill Clinton. And she changed his visit to come to our event, at their event, at a national conference. And it's the first time any president ever addressed a radio conference of that sort ever in the entire history. And here we were the first kids on the block, first time on stage, and first year, we hit 110 stations that first year. And again, I applaud them for that, but we were able to get the Corporation for Public Broadcast, NPR, and also the Notre Dame Communications Center to support us. So let me shift over. This is our house in South Bend, Indiana. We had a big room, not quite this size, maybe 2/3 of this size. No, 1/3 of the size of this room, where we created a gallery space and had a lot of events there when I was at Notre Dame. We did a lot of work at that point with other museums around the country in terms of, we formed a national consortium of Latino research centers, and we got invited people from different museums, the Museo del Barrio in New York, from the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago, from the Smithsonian, and other museums around the country, the Hispanic Art Collection or Museum in Albuquerque, and so we had a lot of different connections. We donated work, Sister Karen and I, from Self-Help Graphics in Mexico City during the first month of the opening of the Museo de la Estampa in Mexico City, first month of opening, and we contributed about 30 works to them, including Tejano artists. So all this is laying the groundwork, okay? We're not the only ones that did things like that, but I'm just talking a little bit about some of these things to show you what we accomplished at that time that had an impact later. And here's my beautiful wife, my boss. So we continue to stay connect with artists over the years, and to the present, still buying art, even though we shouldn't be, and doing many things. So we're going to go into some of the areas that I wanted to talk about here. I already talked about some of them, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. We could go ahead and shift to publications. So we did a lot of exhibitions with our exhibits, with our loans as well as donations to museums around the country. We worked with a lot of non-for-profits. Did we change the publication part?
Yeah.
Okay. One area I wanted to mention, though, is Self-Help Graphics. Sister Karen Bocalero, Franciscan nun, started that non-for-profit organization in East Los Angeles. And she really worked hard to get these artists to learn about art. She studied with Sister, ¿cómo se llama? I'm sorry, it'll come. But they created a really great print studio and had various kinds of programs. And I got put on their board. We submitted a name in Texas of Sam Coronado, who was rejected initially by the master printer. Not because he didn't like his work, but there's a lot of artists he had to select, and it just came up that I guess he selected some artists in LA that he knew. And so Sam wasn't selected. So when I was visiting Sister Karen, she said, let's have a committee meeting and let's get him selected. So Karen and I outnumbered him and we got him selected. He came in, he did a great print with the master printer, and they ended up becoming close friends. And he later on invited Sam to come back. Sam was so impressed with the mission of Self-Help Graphics that and again, Sam is a Texas-based artist. So he created his own print studio 2 years later, the Siri Project. And he was teaching also at one of the universities or colleges, and had the same mission, to get these artists to learn about printmaking, learn more about art, and to have their work exhibited and sold, even though it was not very expensive at that time. and so she wanted the market also. And later she complained that the market really wasn't, people weren't coming in, and if they did, they weren't selecting some of the best art because they just wanted, pretty things or things. So Self-Help continued inviting artists from Texas, and so did Sam Coronado. A lot of Texas artists got to print there, and sometimes for the first time ever in their life, as well as to meet other artists who came into print. And so it's a really wonderful experience. She encouraged me to open up a commercial art gallery. It's her fault. Galería Sin Fronteras. I call it gallery without money. Galería Sin Dinero. But we had enough money to keep open and really have very successful exhibits, and non-profit organizations use our space. I bought a building downtown and transferred it from the area that we first started. I'm glad a commercial building in the heart of downtown between the Capitol, the university, and the heart of downtown. And then I bought another property, so that got me a little more on stage. This is the Galería Sin Fronteras thing was an artist who wasn't Latino who built this. This thing you just saw before, and really glass, beautiful thing that hung over on Guadalupe Street. Through that, we developed a lot more connections with Tejano artists, and also got involved with the community in multiple ways. Got scholars to come in, got connected with research projects, and scholars who also documented the exhibitions and the lives of these artists, as well as politicians who made changes in Texas. Nonprofit La Peña, Cynthia Perez and her sister were really instrumental there in helping artists from that time on to the present. A number of other arts organizations were involved too. The master printer for Coronado Print Studios was Pepe Coronado. Sam passed, unfortunately. We lost him. He was giving a presentation in Fort Worth, Texas, in Indiana. And we weren't there, and he had a heart attack and died. But they're having a retrospective of the work that they had created at the Siri Project that included a lot of Tejano artists, again, getting them out of the state and showing the work more nationally. And so then his master printer created his own studio, Coronado Studios, and continued the tradition of bringing in artists from Texas and outside of Texas. Sam was Dominican, and later on left and went to Washington, opened up a studio there. Not Sam, Pepe. And then back to New York, we spent a lot of time before, and then now back in Austin, and he's looking to have a retrospective of portfolios they've created over the years that Dolores and I have helped them with over the years as well. So again, this idea of born in Texas, moved to Texas, moved out of Texas, taught in Texas, created art in Texas. These artists now exist in several museums in the state of Texas, and also at the Blanton as part of our gift, as well as work they've collected on their own. And they've collaborated with Tejano's artists in creating art projects in Texas and outside the state. Luis Guerra is a good friend who's created a lot of work, and here's a demonstration. The farm workers were pushing to support farm workers in Texas. He's still very active. Carmen Lomas Garza is probably one of the most prominent Tejana artists. She moved years later to San Francisco, has been very productive. We're still good friends and connected. She was from Texas, from Kingsville, and went to Texas A&M University, and she did 2 one-person exhibits at our gallery, the Galería Sin Fronteras in Austin, and also the museum, Laguna Art Museum, director and curator came to visit me, took me to dinner, and said they wanted to do a traveling exhibition of her work. And she wasn't sure when I called her, because they asked me to connect with her, and she was still doubtful because she wasn't sure if it was a big enough museum. Well, she ended up taking it and allowing them to do the exhibit. First, outside of Austin, when it went and traveled to El Paso, the director of the museum said no, not the museum, of the board. the director of the museum said yes, and they had a squabble. They ended up voting off the director of the museum board, and they brought her work. They had the largest turnout ever in the history of that museum. The fabulous show, and it toured. It went to Oakland and many other museums around the country, and eventually the Smithsonian ended up buying a lot of her work. I ended up contributing to a project that she developed. So we'll show you a slide of that later. When I was there, I met at the El Paso Art Museum. This is the Igua en Frida, it's called. And this is the Dia de los Muertos, a work that's created by the artist that I met there. And then we invited him later to Notre Dame. And he made some presentations, and we showed his work at the Snipe Museum. Okay. So other artists outside of Sam, okay. So this is another image of Sam's. A good friend of ours owns that. That's not our work. This was included, I believe, in the exhibit at the Blanton Museum, or one version of it, years back. And then Silvia Orozco, a Texas artist, created Mexicarta. She and her partner Pio Pulido opened it up in 1986. I was on the first board along with Sam Coronado and others. She's a big promoter of Latino art. I went to a show in Mexico City, the first time ever in my life, and saw work that she helped donate of Latino artists from Texas and other parts of the country at a museum that President Echeverria had helped set up. So I really give her a lot of credit. Next artist here, Gaspar, from outside of El Paso. He taught it in El Paso high schools. He became a good friend. They had a wonderful exhibit of his and catalog at the El Paso Art Museum. You know, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago. I wrote it down. I forgot to bring you the date. We loaned 2 pieces of work for this exhibit. They're now part of the Blanton Museum collection. Ruben Trejo, again, not a Texas artist, who was born in a railroad boxcar in Wisconsin, and moved to Washington State, spent a lot of time there. He was very happy with his work that we had in his collection, and we had a one-person show of his at Notre Dame, at the Galeria America at Notre Dame, that I started when I went to Notre Dame at the Institute for Latino Studies. The other Texas artist is Kathy Vargas from San Antonio. I think some of you know her or know her work. She's known all over the country now and beyond. This is an exhibit we had at the Galeria America at Notre Dame, which really was the entrance for the Institute for Latino Studies. We just called it a gallery, and a lot of changing exhibitions. She's in the Snipe Museum collection at Notre Dame, and also at the Blanton Museum collection. Delilah Montoya is another Texas artist. She's been teaching at the University of Houston, here in Houston, in the art department for a number of years. She's a very good friend also. We've done some projects together. An outstanding photographer, and very inspired person who inspired a student from Notre Dame, from El Paso, who graduated Notre Dame, worked with me, got really interested and continued his interest in photography, and then went to study with her to get a master's at Houston, and she had a big impact on his work now, and now today he's being invited all over the country to give lectures, to present his work, and also in the market too. So I'm real happy for him. He married another student that I introduced him to, and then later on, years later, he's going to visit me here in Texas, and I said, I'm in California, I'm not there, and I said, if you're going to go to San Antonio first before you come to Austin, go see Brooks Ebbich. And they met again, and now they're married. Oh, they're almost married. They're together in Chicago. Anyway, I'm real happy about that. There's a work of Kania Desmendi from Corpus Christi. She lives in Austin. She received a Master's of Fine Arts at the Art Institute in Chicago. Again, we're very close friends. She works with me. She worked with me at the gallery. She was the gallery director for a while, and continued to work with Mexicarta and other arts organizations on an installation recently. And we also commissioned her to do an installation at our house. Another artist here, that curator from San Antonio, had organized at the Centro de Arte in the marketplace in San Antonio. Beautiful exhibition. I don't know how it happened, but we ended up buying like 9 or 10 pieces, big paintings. And it was pretty deep in our pockets, but we were happy about that. And that's a piece by Irene Perez. And I'm switching a little bit here now. She's from Venezuela, but she became my gallery director. And we did a lot of work together over the years. And she did this is just, well, you can see all the parts of the painting. I ended up loaning that to Sacramento, a woman now who's head of Banner, V-A-N-I-R. They do a lot of building and properties. Anyways, I'm almost finished here, but she has that work now on loan. She's co-owner of the professional team in Sacramento, the basketball team. Can't remember the name, but it's doing very well. I guess that's the point I want to make. And she's now also on the board of Notre Dame. She went to Notre Dame undergraduate, and I connected her with folks, and she's now on the board, and she directed our center committee initially. Okay. Brian Broccoli. He's not Latino, but he married a woman he met at Georgetown. Was going to school there. And I was on his MFA committee, and he did a lot of work on the border and moved to Veracruz, and they've been doing a lot of work over the years. He worked very closely with artists all over Mexico, and he's teaching there. And right now we're working on a book of his. He's doing the work. I'm just giving some advice and counsel. And he's done a lot of work with Flatbed Press in Austin, so he's still connected to Austin in many ways, doing portfolios and prints. So again, a good friend, he and his wife. Esperanza Gama. That's like forgetting my wife's name. It's beautiful work on this is paper, amate paper. This is from wood. And did some beautiful work. We have a lot of work in our collection. We had a show of hers in Elkhart, Indiana. Lives in Chicago, but originally from Guadalajara, doing prints and paintings in Mexico and the United States. We had a big show in Mexico City at the ambassador's house, big residence. Salazar, who's a former student of mine in Colorado College when I used to do some temporary teaching there at the end of the year of Texas. And we're real happy that he had that. That's still there at the exhibition, actually. It'll come down at some point, but he's still ambassador. It's still there. Okay, Jose Antonio Aguirre from Mexico, went to the Fine Arts Institute in Chicago, met him in Texas. He really, again, also helped me and encouraged me to open up the gallery. He moved to LA, got close to Sister Karen, and I continued to see him there, and we stayed connected over the years. I was asked by Sister Karen to help them start an etching studio. I didn't know exactly how to do it. I didn't know any foundations at that point that would fund it. So I said, we'll just raise money independently. So I made a contribution, and I got about 10 other friends. We got 10 artists to work and to do etchings on the immigration question. So I won't get into the details of that, but it's really, really outstanding, and we did a really great job. And we had a show of that work along with other work of Texas artists. Amado Peña was the first artist I bought artwork from when I moved to Texas. He had a studio there. He later on moved to Santa Fe, and he has a gallery there, but he also travels the country. He's really good at marketing, and he, again, has been a big influence on my collecting, and especially with printmaking. Okay, we switched it. Jose Antonio is an artist who passed away. I think I mentioned that already. I showed you the opening for our first show at Galerías Sin Fronteras. Again, we miss him. And okay, Mil Casas is not in my collection. When you make collections and you do things and you miss opportunities, well, this is a good example of a missed opportunity. Big missed opportunity. I got to meet him, but never really was able to purchase his work, or somehow just missed it. So I won't go into the details of my accident there. El Rendon, photographer in San Antonio, is a wonderful photographer. His show just recently, I think, completed at the White Museum in San Antonio. Beautiful catalog. It's still there? Oh, okay. I thought it was coming down. Beautiful. We got a hard copy copy of his work, and on that, and of course, we have his artwork as well. We're donating to the Blanton. Alan Pogue, who's not Latino, he's from El Corpus, photographer, documentary photographer, got involved a lot with, when I moved to Austin, with the farm worker movement in Texas. And he's had a studio across the street from campus. Got to meet him. When I opened my studio, or my gallery, in the back of one of the parts of the building, he ended up creating a studio in the back and actually lived in it for a while. And continued his work and did a lot of work on the farm workers and other areas of women, and just in general, this is the Johnson Museum on campus. Malaquis Montoya, is from Myra, California. Now I lived in Colorado, in New Mexico initially. He was born in 1938. He's getting up there. We missed his birthday this week, actually. He became a visiting professor at UT San Antonio for a short period of time. He taught at UC San Diego as a professor there, and before that in Oakland at a private campus school. He participated in the monoprints that strike editions that we used to work with, the strike editions in Austin, and one of them, I don't know if I have a copy of that or not, but it's of Columbus, Christopher Columbus. And the Jewish Museum in New Jersey, I believe, or New York, had borrowed it and eventually offered to donate it. I think they still have it. I'm happy that they took that interest. He got his degree, master's degree at UC Berkeley, and continued to do work a lot with Texas artists and training them as well. When I went to visit him, and I helped my gallery, he said, "Why haven't you invited us?" Him and his wife. And I said, "Because you don't sell your work." Well, we decided if you invited us, we would give you the work, which he did, and it was real helpful. In fact, we had to call him for some more additional work for people who were interested in buying some of the prints that we had already sold. Daniel Manrique, thing that Malaquis did, he didn't want to sell his work at that time. He just was against that idea. He just wanted to create art for the people. To quote Jean Charlot, the French artist who went to Mexico in the 1920s. He served in World War I in France. And I didn't get a chance to meet him. I visited his wife. They had a home they built on the 18th hole of Waikiki Beach, so at the golf course. But I got to stay with her and see more of his work and learn more about Charlot after reading a lot about his work and really admiring him. But this idea of art for the people, Daniel Manrique carried as well in Mexico City. It's a very centralized government in the art world, and he didn't want anything to do with that. He was from Tepito and created an art place called Tepito Art de Acá, art for the people in the oldest residential neighborhood of Mexico City. Unfortunately, we had 2 exhibits of his work, and he passed too. So really admired him. We have here also, outside of Austin, Taller Boricua in New York, one of the founders of it, and a longtime director of that program in New York. He has passed away as well. We did a lot of projects together. And again, exhibiting Texas artists, we had a one-time show from our collection at their space and included a lot of Texas artists. So I'm trying to make that connection nationally and how this connects with other artists. They started collaborating, sending print artists from Texas to New York artists to work in the print studios in Austin. And so those connections really were helpful to the artists to not only help the print studios, but also to get them interested in other ways of doing their work and meeting artists around the country. So I was real pleased about that. That was their initiative. Mariana Yomplotski, I imagine a lot of you might know about her. Internationally renowned photographer in Mexico City. A friend of ours from Britain who was in the sociology department contacted me. He knew her and to do a one-person show, which we did. And again, she was really helpful and grateful and was very contributing to us as well. I ended up buying some work. It's now at the Blanton Museum. It's part of our Texas collection. She invited me to go with her on the border to photograph later, not then, but she doesn't fly, and I'm a flyer. And so she wanted to train, et cetera. So it's just too much at that time for me. I missed that opportunity. She has since passed. Alejandro Romero, we had a one-person show of his. He's from Mexico, lives in Chicago, a great artist, and sold a lot of his work. We stay connected. We just sent him and his wife to Los Angeles. He was invited to do a print there with Jose Antonio Aguirre, the one I mentioned earlier. Then here we're going to a Texas artist, real famous one, Cesar Martinez, who, this is the cover of this project here. We did a lot of projects with Mexico on the border, with Amelia Malagamba, and exhibits, workshops, traveling shows in the U.S. and Mexico, including Mexico City. And this is one of the catalogs we published. Years later, when I told you about the museum in Austin, this is the catalog that they published when they toured Carmen show. The one to Paso that I told you have to watch that ever catalog.
Dr. Cárdenas, give it a mic.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That helps, doesn't it? Good idea. Okay. This is another one. It's called the Festival Internacional de la Raza. They do it annually, and they fund this, and we have at the Centro Cultural de Tijuana an exhibit almost every year for a number of years from our collection, from Malaquias Montoya's work from our collection, that travel the country. When it went to Mexico City, they treated it like a Warhol show. They had signs all over the place in terms of the billboards. You drive on the freeway, you see the signs, this and that. It was a great turnout, invited a lot of artists down and scholars. This is one of Byron Broccoli's work that the director of the Roy Fulkinger of the photography museum at the, what's the name of the place? At the Harry Ransom Center, thank you. We did this together of Byron's work on the border. And more recently, the Snipe Museum, they're going to do a book on the collection, but this is their opening exhibit that they had where they invited artists and ourselves to thank us for the donation. This is the opening one for the Notre Dame Center for Art and Culture off campus that I helped start, and a building we renovated. Oh, Artemio. This is an artist from Tacámbaro, Mexico. Met him in LA, he and his wife are both artists. They moved to Pátzcuaro by the Placita, and they have a space there where they show artwork. They sell food, and across the street he ended up getting this old building from the government and put a library in part of the building for children. And it's doing a lot of work. He had a print studio at his house, a little far out of town, that he brings in artists from all over the country to do work. But he also has been very prolific, and the Snipe Museum, the Notre Dame Center for Art and Culture, Blanchard Museum, contacted him and about a painting they wanted to have, or some work. In addition to that, is gigantic prints, mural-sized prints. And he, in our honor, gave them a gigantic discount. And they asked if I would help out make the difference to that. And so we've contributed some. We've got a lot of friends to contribute. So if anybody's interested ever in computing, let me know. But it's going to be a spectacular show once they get it set up. They don't have a date yet, but I'm real pleased. He's a good friend. We used to visit him in Pátzcuaro, and as well as before that in Tacámbaro. Major impact on printmaking in Mexico. Okay. An artist that showed in various places in Los Angeles. I ended up buying this. She showed it. We brought it to Chicago. I paid for her flight to go to the National Museum of Mexican Art. I was on their board at the time, and then we purchased the work. We haven't contributed yet to a museum, so if you know any museums that have an interest in big pieces, this would be wonderful. It's for Dia de los Muertos. It's still at our house. Needs a new home. I've not been in touch with her recently, but I think she's an attorney now. I hope she's still doing art. She's really good artist. She would call my assistant and use a bad word Where's so-and-so, Gil? I won't say the word. My sister, somebody wants to talk to you, Gil. But she's always just goofing around and playing. Sherazade Garcia, Dominican artist, now teaching at UT. Really a great teacher. So you have a lot of artists, not just Latino, other artists as well, learning from her. She's just recently sent a message out. She's in Argentina now, in Buenos Aires, for shows. She's been showing all over the world. And we're real happy for her. We've been collecting her work as well. She had a fellowship from a foundation once. They were in Spain. We went to visit her and her husband for a week. Done a lot of work together. And going to the end here, there's a group of people here that took a photograph with. And just to show you, mention some names of scholars, and they're not all here, but Tomás Ibarra Frausto, who's with the hat. Chon Noriega, who's not there, from UCLA, just retired. Karen Mary Davila, she just did a book with another colleague who's there next to me on self-help graphics. And then we have Mark Zimmerman from Chicago, who's published a lot of books over the years with close friends who've been to visit him in Puerto Rico. Tatiana Reynosa is the other artist, editor. She's now at Notre Dame. We knew her when she was in Texas. She used to be at Davis. Claudia Zapata is the curator they hired to manage our collection for the Latino art collection. Olga Herrera, a good friend. When I was at Notre Dame, we reconnected, and she's been based in Washington and worked for us for a number of years in Washington, opened up a center there for us. Gary Keller, who has since passed away, moved from Michigan to Arizona and did a lot of work in publishing Latino artists. Amelia Malagamba, real close friend, living in San Antonio now, but she's the person I worked with from Mexico, who went from Mexico City to Tijuana to start what was Centro de Estudios Fronterizos, and then later became COLEF. They have this high-rise building and other buildings they created where they got to a master's degree, and a lot of it focusing on art as well, and artists. And they're the ones that sponsored the Festival Internacional de la Raza and the touring exhibitions. Chich Marin, a good friend, he stayed with us. We stayed with him when they had Pacific Standard Time, all the exhibits that the Mellon Foundation funded in California. He was our chauffeur for a week. We loved his house, loved his wife, and he introduced me to artists I didn't know. He probably is the best spokesperson for Latino art in the world. I'm just so happy what he's been doing to advance Latino art and to collect it and to support artists. Really thrilled. Here's a photograph I worked on years back in 1998. I made a connection with the Smithsonian. They published a book, included an article of mine, and then in 1992, they asked me to join a task force to look at the situation of Latinos in the Smithsonian Museum. Their goal is to tell the story of the American people. Even though they had things in their archive about Latino art, they didn't really know what they had, and we ended up creating programs, and I made a proposal to create a center, which they eventually did. The committee voted for it, and then later they had we were pretty negative, nobody on the board, very few curators, not very much expertise, not very much organization. They accepted all our recommendations, except they didn't want to talk about a museum, because at that time in the Congress there was a lot of anti-migration or museum funding. And so the secretary asked us not to do that, but we put it as part of our focus to look at what to do to get these things corrected at the Smithsonian. And it's called the Oversight Committee. Well, later on, we made the advancement for a museum along with other recommendations. And later I got appointed by President Bush. I was on his national committee when he was elected president to create a Latino museum at the Smithsonian. Smithsonian told us they wanted to do it at the Smithsonian. Our commission looked at that, and we made that recommendation. So we had a photograph here. Later, I stayed on the commission, and President Obama got to meet me. So, okay. So now the future. So this is kind of going to my conclusion. Our culture is American culture. And you can see the boundaries at one time of what Mexico was and how far it went up. What's part of the United States now. The goal in life is to reestablish the recognition of the territorial history, culture, and contributions of Mexicanos, Latinos, and Tejanos as central to the historical and present-day United States. Scholarship and the arts are vital to recovering our history and providing Americans and the global community with a better understanding and better opportunity to appreciate our history and our collective experiences. In the past, our presence had been underrepresented, misrepresented, or just ignored outright. I'm talking about scholars and other areas. The Cárdenas Garcia collection serves as an artist history, as a means, artistic history, as a means to highlight Tejano and Latino artists and the ways that their creativity has shined a light and helped alter many of these problems that we still face today. Now the focus shifts to providing attention to our role in America's future. With that, I'm going to just say thank you very much for your patience and appreciate your putting up with me for my confusions. Thank you.
Can we get the first slide back up? I want to bring your attention to this first slide because it's what we're all about too. With the wheel of, keep going. Yeah, this. So this is what we're about as well. Just read the way that circle goes of activism and art, and I can't read it from here. Art, community, scholarship, that's us. Emphasis on Latino culture, substitute everything. Art is action, art shows, personal relationships with artists. That's what this group is all about. Anyway, thank you very much. That was wonderful.